Good morning. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the College and Law. Excuse me. It's a great pleasure to welcome you, colleagues and participants, to the second day of the 8th Annual Academic Monitoring and Support Research Colloquium for 2021, jointly hosted by the College of Law and Management Studies Teaching and Learning Unit in partnership with the UKZN Teaching and Learning Office. I sincerely hope you will enjoy today's discussions and presentations. Thank you for your participation. My name is Dr. Joseph Jere from the Teaching and Learning Unit, and I'll be assisting in directing today's proceedings. A few house rules. Please post the questions in the Q&A section of the webinar and reserve the chat for the general chat conversations. During the Q&A session, please state your name and who the question is directed to on the panel. I'd like to begin by calling upon the head of the Teaching and Learning Unit, Dr. Anna Bengisai, to give an overview of the day's program.
Thank you, Dr. Jerry. Welcome, colleagues, to the second day of our colloquium. Yesterday, we reflected mainly on our experiences during the COVID and online learning, and we also had a seminar on a workshop on managing stress during COVID-19. Our focus in today's session shifts to the interventions that we have in our colleges. In the first seminar, we have our Deans of Teaching and Learning, and it will be chaired by Prof. Danpath, and they will focus on how the different colleges have managed student support during the emergent remote teaching and learning. That will be followed by another session where the directors of teaching and learning in the different colleges will present college case studies on the interventions, the impact, the effectiveness of the interventions over the past few years. That will be followed by critical reflections for the day, as well as, and then we end our colloquium at 12:30 with closing remarks from Prof. Mkhize. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bengisai. At this point, I'd like to move to the keynote panel discussion, whose focus is on AMS roadmap at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I wish to therefore take this great opportunity and pleasure to introduce the panelists. On the panel, we have Professor Ruth Hoskins, who is the Dean for Teaching and Learning in the College of Humanities. We have Professor Naven Chetty, who is the Dean for Teaching and Learning in the College of Agriculture, Engineering and Science. We also have Professor Snegugu Duma, who is the Dean for Teaching and Learning in the College of Health Sciences. And then we have Professor Msizi Mkhize, who is the Dean for Teaching and Learning in the College of Law and Management Studies. The session will be chaired by Professor Danpath, who is the Director for Teaching and Learning at the UKZN Teaching and Learning Office. Over to the panelists. I thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. My apologies, but I'm going to have to turn my camera off because of connectivity problems. Thank you again. So, colleagues, in an earlier engagement, I noted that 2020 and 21 represented for higher education the best of times and the worst of times. And I don't want to dwell into the worst because that seems to be well in the psyche and minds of everybody. What I want to do in this session is focus on the work, sterling work done by our Deans of Teaching and Learning, whom, as you know, have been in the forefront of the sudden shift in the migration to remote teaching and learning, which gradually evolved into blended teaching and learning. And it represented the best of times because it provided us, or it catapulted us into the future, which previously we theorized, but we suddenly had to deal with it as the reality. So we've themed this, this engagement, this panel discussion, re-envisioning AMS into the future and how, or what AMS will look like in the years to come. And to initiate that, discuss the conversation, we'll have Ruth, our Dean of Teaching and Learning in the College of Humanities, Ruth Hoskins, and she will sketch the overview and context for us briefly, which will be followed by Professor Naveen Chetty, Dean of Teaching and Learning in the College of Agriculture, Science and Engineering. And he will talk briefly about what have we done differently under COVID-19? What new tools and strategies have we adopted? This will be followed by Professor Sine Duma, Dean of Teaching and Learning in College of Health Sciences, who will talk to us about some of the more daunting and absorbing challenges during this time. And finally, we have Mzizi, our Professor Mzizi, who is our Dean of Teaching and Learning in the College of Law and Management Studies. And he will reflect on what opportunities have we been provided to move into the future renewed as higher education with new approaches, new tools, new strategies, and possibly new policies. So with that, let me hand over to Ruth. Each speaker will speak for roughly 10, 12 minutes. And once they have all delivered their short addresses, which we hope will be a conversation rather than formal presentations, we will then open up the floor for you for Q&A. Please feel free to drop your comments, questions in Q&A, and then there'll be a live session where if you raise your hands, we will give you an opportunity to contribute. Thank you very much, Ruth.
Thank you so much, Prof. Danpot, and good morning, colleagues. It's such an honor to be here today at the Colloquium, having had really a good, exciting session yesterday. So the opportunity for the Deans of Teaching and Learning now to reflect on what we've done under COVID in terms of our AMS program here at UKZN is really fantastic. So we all know that AMS runs from the Office of the Dean of Teaching and Learning under a grant that we get from the Department of Higher Education and Training called the CDP, a Capacity Development Grant. But having said that, we know that if we look at the ethos of UKZN, we're all about inclusive education. So as a result, we've always ensured that we by setting what we call a key performance area for ourselves to ensure that students from a disadvantaged background, from schools that are what we call quintiles 1 to 3, these are lower head counts, rural schools, impoverished environments. So we attract students from those disadvantaged backgrounds and we enable them that access to a higher education institution. So because of our ethos of inclusive education at UKZN, we have to ensure that besides having a really good mainstream curriculum, we also have to have an excellent academic monitoring and support program to support our students to transition when they come into the system. So looking at some of the initiatives we provided throughout our AMS programs, you will see that some of the key role players, besides our officers of the Dean of Teaching and Learning and our heads of Teaching and Learning and AMS and Student Success, you will see that we've employed quite a few stakeholders, including our peer mentors, our wellness mentors, our bilingual tutors, our supplemental instructors, and even the mainstream tutors that support the mainstream curriculum, our academic development officers. Then in addition, we have providing that psychosocial support, our student counselors who come from the student support system. So working as a team within the system, the 4 colleges with the 4 deans of teaching and learning operate in a framework. And that framework is our policies. So we have, and we recently revised our academic monitoring and support policy. And in that policy, it makes it clear that we must provide the necessary and appropriate academic monitoring and support to our students. Coupled with that policy also is our exclusions policy. And the exclusions policy is really a proactive policy. It's not about removing students, but rather it's about tracking their performance in terms of early to ensure that we identify any student who's struggling from an academic perspective, also from a wellness social perspective, and then provide the necessary support to ensure that that student is successful in their performance and overall in their study with us at UKZN. So initially, as you know, many of the offerings in our college for AMS were offered via what we would call a contact mode or face-to-face. The hard lockdown that we saw early in 2020, the institution under the ambit of its chancellor put together a task team, a teaching and learning task team, which includes colleges and the 4 deans of teaching and learning. That task team with the DVC of teaching and learning, Prof. Sonka, was tasked with coming up with the emergency remote online teaching and learning plan. Now, part of our teaching and learning plan includes our academic monitoring and support program. So while we worked hard on putting together in a very short space of time, the emergency remote online teaching and learning plan, at the same time, the 4 deans of teaching and learning with their heads within their units and their coordinators were working very hard to put together the reformatted academic monitoring and support programs that we were offering in each of our colleges. So with those plans in mind, what this meant is we had to migrate also to an emergency remote online way of, and my colleagues later on are going to elaborate in more detail in terms of what new tools and platforms we had adopted, methods of delivery, and also what we've learned from this. Given that so it did require, from a contextual perspective, us to ready our AMS staff as well. So over and above additional financial resources from the Chief Financial Officer to put those necessary resources and tools in place, it did require a rethinking, a refocusing, and training of the AMS staff, as well as a completely different mode of online delivery for those staff. So I'm now going to hand over back to Prof. Dunport that we've now outlined this context in which we had to operate in, and my colleagues now will add on to what I've just elaborated on. Thank you so much, Prof. Dunport.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for that eloquent and concise overview and context setting. We now move on to Prof. Naveen Chetty, who will talk to us about what have we done differently, what's new. Prof. Chetty.
Thank you, Prof. Danpat, and thank you, Prof. Hoskins, for that introduction. Good morning, colleagues. It's indeed a pleasure to address you this morning. I think these colloquiums online have made it so much easier to participate and be able to share our experiences. I think we're all in this boat together, so it's nice to have an opportunity to engage and discuss this. The reality is, if you spoke to us in 2019 and we asked about what was going on in terms of the online space, and we would have said nothing. We're a contact university. There was a reluctance to move online. As Prof. Hoskins outlined, what we've done in a space of 18 months or a little bit over 18 months is actually revolutionize the way we view teaching and learning at the institution. When other areas were falling down and were stopping from actually moving, we moved forward, and we moved forward not just one step at a time, but incrementally leaps and bounds ahead of where we were in 2019. So COVID-19 has not been all bad for UKZN. In fact, it may have been a blessing in disguise because it forced us to move ahead, whereas other instances we were taking many steps backward and trying not to embrace this technological ideal. So coming with that, it brought about changes through the way we did many things. One of the greatest impact that we see and that we managed to use better was Moodle. Now, Moodle prior to this was merely a dumping ground. Very few people used Moodle to the extent of it being an online learning and learning platform. It was more used as a dumping ground for PDFs, and we would put stuff online in little bits and pieces. Moodle went from being an afterthought to being the forefront of what we did in teaching and learning. In fact, it became the essential tool to run and deliver lectures, assessments, and online learning in general. So for the first 6 months of 2020, we virtually did not do any online, didn't do anything in contact. Everything was online, and Moodle played a big role in that. So supplementing Moodle, we had to find ways of delivering lectures, and academics really became very creative with the help of divisions such as UTEL, our support staff in the colleges. Many tools were utilized to try and bring down, firstly, the data cost for students so that they could get videos and tutorials online without actually having to use a lot of data. So creative methods came out, such as PowerPoints that were annotated and voice over PowerPoints. Some staff used podcasts, others used WhatsApp. In fact, I even saw some academics using Facebook to teach. And here were the instruments that we would always be frowning upon. In a physical class, you would frown upon a student who was on their cell phone, on WhatsApp, or you're looking at Facebook. Whereas in the online mode, we actually embraced that. We knew the students would be using those. And across colleges, staff embraced the ways they could best communicate with students. The formation of communities of practice, such as ULAP and UTAP, they engaged students and staff for platforms where they could find material. Colleges developed their own platforms for communities of practice. This gave people a chance to share experiences, to engage with the learning that needed to be done. So for training, it was a huge bound. I mean, lots of academics would never use these online tools. Students, you can imagine, students were in a real pickle because they'd never used these tools before, had to be trained. And the way it was rolled out was in a manner that benefited both staff and students. In fact, in some training where it was directed at students, you had staff members sitting in those trainings because they wanted to pick up skills that would help them. They wanted skills that would help them. I'm sorry, I'm just going to switch my video off because I think the network is a bit poor. So essentially, we managed to go online and have all of these tools that staff and students could utilize. One of the biggest areas that we need to focus on as we move forward is how to sustain that. There's a real indication that staff are tired of being online alone, that staff are wanting to come back and use face-to-face, and we're a contact university, but the reality is the world's changed. We've made huge strides forward. So it would be nice to maintain that impetus and try and keep these tools going. It's not only revolutionized the way we've worked in the academic sphere in teaching and learning, but if you look at in the HR sphere, we've managed to make appointments of staff and interview a much more diverse crowd of people for positions because we're utilizing the tools such as Microsoft Teams and Zoom. And these tools have become essential buzzwords in the way we do our business daily. If you look at an academic who's got to engage with lectures, there's the flexibility that's now provided through the online platform that they can have the flexibility in the way they deliver lectures. There's the flexibility for more interaction rather than your fixed 45-minute class lecture as it was in the past. There's no doubt we cannot go away from the fact that we need the contact and we need to engage with the students for that holistic experience. But the online mode has certainly provided the tools that we now have developed to move us forward into the fourth industrial revolution, to maintain the status quo of doing some stuff online. So blended learning approach is the way we probably need to go as we move forward. But certainly the tools that we've developed will help us engage in a much higher level with our students. And it'll also bring to staff an aspect of continuing professional development that will help them take their lectures to another level and achieve those learning outcomes that we want to achieve in all of our modules. I think I'm going to stop there, Professor Danpat, and hand over back to you again without going into much more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen. We'll return to you in a bit with the details, but thank you for that upbeat, very promising future that we move into. I now hand you over to Professor Sinead Duma, who will tell us a bit about what kept her awake at night during these 2 years. Professor Duma.
Thank you, Professor Danpas, and thank you, my colleagues, Professor Chetty and Professor Hopkins, for making it seem like it was a smooth journey. It wasn't. I will be talking about the challenges that we faced as we were moving towards this. Oops, it says my network is unstable. May I ask to switch off from the video and continue my without the video, please? Okay, thank you. Yeah, there were challenges, while my colleagues have expressed the better side of things. But of course, when challenges are there, we also find ways of dealing with those challenges. You know, during that period, we had that shift from what we know, which is usually the focus in the classroom. However, what COVID-19 really pushed us to do was to start focusing mostly on the factors that impact on student success that are outside the classroom. Because remember, we had sent the students away from the university. So we had to be responsible and accountable for whatever was happening in their lives while they were outside the university, especially in terms of the AMS, that is academic monitoring and support. So doing that meant that we had to creatively and innovatively come up with interventions, both for groups, but also for individual students. However, you will also remember that our student support services, where now most of the task was resting for containing the students, most of those are done by professionals, be it psychologists or social workers. These people have professional board requirements. So in our creativity and our innovation and our excitement of trying to help the students, we were unfortunately also have to deal with those requirements from the boards. For instance, there is no communication or counseling that is supposed to happen without a written consent. Now you have to be counseling a person that is on the other side, and you don't even know if it's actually the right person. So the issues of consent had to be addressed. Fortunately, at least I'm going to talk about the examples in the health sciences, which I think were the same for other colleges as well. Legal services had to assist in making sure that there was a way of having some digital or visual form of that consent. So that was challenge number one, that our student support services had to address being assisted by the legal services, because we needed to maintain that professionalism, that ethics around helping students, to make sure that we do not find ourselves wanting at the end of the day. There were quite a number of other limitations that people have been mentioning even yesterday in terms of limitations with online, but we knew that we had a responsibility. So we had to find those ways. It meant that whether you were an academic development officer, that is an ADO, or a peer mentor, or an academic mentor, or supplemental instructor, as others would call them, or tutor, you knew that your responsibility was not only now on what you were appointed for. If you are a peer wellness mentor who normally would be talking about things that are outside of the classroom, but students were now pushing or asking for you to become an ICS specialist. For instance, if they had logging in issues, they had to be assisted in that fashion before you could even refer to ICS. So we had to have these multi-skilled people overnight. And even us sitting, I want to say sitting in our offices, but sitting wherever we were, when a student has not found joy in trying and using the online system in reaching student support services, we had to find ourselves doing this exactly whatever they were asking for. Remember that in the same sense, we were also experiencing similar challenges. Everybody was panicking because of the disease that was threatening our lives, our family members, and everybody else. So one could actually look at it as saying, we were having this, what we would term vicarious trauma. We were traumatized, but we're also supposed to support students to make sure that no student was left behind. So in terms of that, unfortunately, on the staff level, maybe the debriefing was not as intense as it was for students, but the HR was also there to try and make those available for staff, to those services for staff. The challenge was not everybody could access that, not because they didn't want to, but because there was no time, because all our resources, all our attention and everything else had to be put towards assisting the students in ensuring that no student was left behind. There was also an increase in terms of emergencies. I will talk about mostly this, of course, is mostly from the experience from the health sciences. We experience an increase in terms of emergencies, like students who were having emotional issues, students who were having suicidal ideations. In fact, if you were to look at it, even if you were to go back to the university notices of last year, there were so many deaths. And some of them are not accounted for. Nobody would say whether it was a disease or whether it was an accident or whatever. But that alone, students were reading about it, and in their minds, they were thinking, am I the next? And when they were thinking that, then they were panicking. And when they were panicking, they were either calling their peer wellness mentors, who, by the way, are also students, who, by the way, are also experiencing more or less the same. So it was that we were in that state. We needed to hold each other in many ways. And I'm glad that student support services did manage to do that, not only for themselves, but also for students, as well as sometimes even parents were phoning, panicking. In health sciences, they were even worried about, will my child ever become a doctor, or will they manage to finish the year and graduate? Or even the students were worried about ever managing to meet the clinical requirements that they were having. So we were in that state. While we were in the state of also being worried about your family members who have just gone shopping, you wondered if they were going to come back with this and bringing it home while you were safely working from home, but you were also scared of anyone who leaves your gate and going outside, that they would be doing things that would bring the issue to us. I may sound like I'm just digressing, but those were real challenges that student support services were reporting to us. And it meant that as a dean who has a responsibility towards that, you also needed to listen. The least we could do was just to listen and show people that you were there for them. And then, of course, the issue of confidentiality was critical in the sense, because when a student was calling, you didn't even know if it's really a student, and you didn't know if there was someone on the other side who is listening to the discussion that you're having. So counselors had to find means and ways of ensuring that confidentiality was maintained at all times. One thing that happens with, especially with the counselors who, by the way, are health practitioners, is that when a person comes, the benefits of face-to-face counseling is that not only are you listening to what they're saying, but you are also able to assess their state. In what state are they? Will they go and do what I am proposing that they should be doing? Or is there an underlying issue to what they're saying? Unfortunately, with the virtual ways of counseling, this was a challenge, because a student would call maybe talking about the issues or academic issues, but when you were listening, you could tell that there is more to it. A number of other issues that were reported, which under normal circumstances, we do have students reporting rape, we're reporting GBV, but now when they first came back on campus, we also had to deal with that now in an increase in numbers. The reason being simple, people were now stuck in their rooms and stuck in the residences instead of being able to even dodge each other if ever there's a way that one can dodge people coming and wanting to abuse you in any fashion. So the issue of safe, private, and secure environment was big in the sense that even when we said these students were given data, we couldn't tell if that data is used by the student for the right purposes. But those who were given gadgets, we also couldn't tell what would happen if, for instance, if you have been chatting on WhatsApp with the student and we're discussing issues that are very important. Remember, I said there was that shift to us focusing even on the outside the classroom issues. Now, if that cell phone or anything lands itself on the hands of a parent, and the discussion between the student and the counselor was, or the ADO for that matter, or the lecturer for that matter, was that I am leaving this course or I am failing. How is that going to be dealt with? So there were all those things. So each and every time when they had to start having these discussions, a counselor had to remind the student to say, remember about the safety of this discussion. Remember how to look for, how to stay safe. Remember how to keep your gadgets in such a way that this discussion is between you and me. Things that under normal circumstances, you wouldn't even be discussing when you are counseling a student and she has come to the services in the university. Some of the students reported being in large households where they could not have that privacy, where they could not discuss their issues easily. And it was just one of those things. But I don't want to talk about the issues of the data because we all know about all those things. But it was quite impossible to hold some individual sessions. We all know they were not there. But when one good thing, and I don't want to take over from what Prof. Mkhize is going to be talking about, but I am just stressing how difficult it was, even when we're having group sessions, because counselors were reporting that you didn't even know if all the people who have logged in are the students, or if there's also another ear that is not supposed to be. The benefit about that, of course, is that they could learn from the strategies that were being shared and taught to the students. Issues of GBV, I've mentioned. Cyberbullying. I had to deal with an issue where the lecturer was complaining about cyberbullying that was happening in her presence on the chats, because that is what was open to students. So all those things that we never, under normal circumstances, maybe students are going to leave the classroom and start bullying each other. Now with this virtual environment, and they were able to be even doing that in front of us. What happened to us, starting from the counselors, even down to myself, were the issues of burnout. Sitting in front of this computer, waiting and interacting or waiting for calls from students and doing and having all these other meetings really can also be, it can also lead to burnout. Others yesterday referred to it as digital fatigue. And then there was also this blurring of boundaries, because students felt that you have said you will be available, so they could call at any time. There was suddenly there was no family time. There was no other way of saying to students, I will not be available by this time, because then it will not be this. If you were not available at a certain time, when that call came from a peer wellness mentor, you knew there was trouble. When that call came from maybe an academic mentor who now is reporting that a student that you had not taken on earlier on is now threatening suicide, nobody would have stayed sane with such. So we opened up our spaces to a point where a number of people were really reporting that this blurring of boundaries of that time was too much. However, within even that, while they were reporting, they were still available. I think more than anything else, it's very important to indicate that the student support services this time around, while we always know them to be looking at the wellness of the student, they were also able to traverse and move even to the academic, because referral is easier. But there is a time when you are having this one person and you want to contain the person, and you would find within you means and ways of assist them academically, if you could, assist them on how to log in, if you could. So we became multi-taskers and multi-skilled in just trying to make sure that the students, there was that balance between ensuring that both the academic issues as well as the personal issues of students were taken care of, so that no student was left behind. It was quite complex. It still is. However, I like the fact that what this has done to our student support services is that it has made them to look at other means. Right now, with a team of the student support services in the College of Health Sciences and Dr. Kumalo from Education, as well as a team from now looking at developing and piloting a technology-enhanced student engagement tools for sustainable academic success and holistic wellness because of the challenges that we realized since the pandemic, that much as we say students need to take a responsibility and be accountable for coming to student support services, we need to make it easier for them, hence this development that this project that we're involved in of developing that technology-enhanced student engagement strategy. I think I will stop, otherwise I'll end up looking at everything that I think Prof. Mkhize will be talking about. Over to you, Prof. Danpath. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. Sine. In the interest of time, I'm going to move quickly to Mzizi, our ever positive, hopeful Dean of Teaching and Learning. And he's going to look into the crystal ball and tell us what he sees in the future of higher education. Over to you, Mzizi. Please unmute, Mzizi.
Thank you, Prof. Prof and colleagues, please allow me to turn my video off because of network. Colleagues, things will never be the same. So we must embrace opportunities offered by digital transformation. Remember, colleagues, most of our undergraduate students are Generation Y. They are born between 1980 and 1996. So they have grown up with technology. And we also have Generation Z, born between 1997 and 2015, and they are born digitally. We must embrace the adoption of digital technology. Technology won't replace teachers, but teachers who use technology will probably replace teachers who do not. Now we are better equipped to adopt a more blended learning approach, flipped classroom approach post COVID-19 pandemic. So we must have synchronous support methods, mechanisms, using Zoom, using MS Teams. For formal support, the support, it can be one-to-one support, a teacher giving a student support, or one-to-many, a tutor is giving students the support. And even we must have the asynchronous support mechanisms, because students can access information anywhere, anytime. Therefore, we must use the learning management system, the Moodle. We must use the social media, because academic support is 24/7 now. It's 24 hours, 7 days a week. You can access the material anywhere, anytime. So the support can be formal, perhaps in a Zoom class. It can be also non-formal, that is asynchronous support. During the asynchronous support, students can support each other, peer-to-peer support, even during the formal support. So we have to promote the peer-to-peer support, because students learn from each other. The teacher-to-peer support, teachers-to-student support is also important. But as a teacher, when you support the students, you are like the facilitator. Let them support each other. And as a teacher, you must guide them. You must just add whatever that you want to add at the end. So this method is a method to cultivate student success. The formal academic support provided by the tutors, the ADOs, the supplemental instructors must have 3 components. Remember when we were teaching face-to-face, our lectures, our lessons used to have the introduction phase, the content delivery phase, the conclusion phase. Even the formal support that we give, it must have the phases, the introduction, content delivery, and the conclusion phase. But now we have the opportunity to use the online tools. The online tools are important. For example, in the introduction phase, we can use the Google Forms, we can even use the Google Docs. These tools are called the Google Drive tools. From the Google Drive tools, you get the Google Forms, you get the Google Docs. So these tools can be used as for assessing the students, the baseline assessment, the pre-test. And when you assess the students, you must ask the low order questions during the introduction phase. It can be MCQs, multiple choice questions, pre-test, even brainstorming. There is a tool which is important, which is called Padlet. It's very important for brainstorming. You can use it when you support your students. Even the story-based questions, you can use these tools again. And the content delivery phase, you can use the Google Docs, the Google Slides, the Google Sheets. And these tools are important for collaboration, for teamwork, for group work. And your activities must promote creativity and critical thinking and problem solving. And when you use the tools here, like the Zoom is part of this, you can also have the breakaway rooms. In your Zoom class, then you are using these tools, the Google Forms, the Google Slides, the Google Sheets. The Google Slides are like your PowerPoint. The Google Sheets are like your Excel. But as a teacher, you can comment on the information prepared by the students, and the students can also comment on each other's work. The conclusion phase of the support, you can use Google Forms, even Google Sites for e-portfolios. The online reflections are important, another way of assessing the students. When the students, they complete these tools, you immediately get the information, perhaps in a summary form or individual answers. So these tools are very, very important. We must use. Post-COVID-19, we are going to use these tools, especially the Google Drive tools, including the Panelists and other tools that are available for free. The summative assessments, the assignments and formal tests now are going to be online. After COVID-19, will be online. The students will access the assessment on the learning management system, and the submission will be on the learning management system. Even the grading will be on the will be online. So no face-to-face submissions. In your Zoom support class, all students are in front now. This is helping them to focus, to concentrate. No one hides. So they learn skills required by employers. So they learn technical skills and they learn pervasive skills as well. The communication, the problem solving, the teamwork, the time management, the leadership, the critical thinking, the decision making, professionalism, even positively influencing each other. Direct interaction with tutors and peers. There's no face-to-face interaction now online. Now we're going to have now the face-to-screen interaction. Even the distance and physical space do not constrain us now. If physical space is not available, therefore have online support via Zoom. Or block style academic support to emerge. Perhaps 1 week we're going to have face-to-face support, another week we're going to have the online support. Post-COVID-19, we're going to have few face-to-face class presentations. To emerge, it will be online webinar discussions, presentations. We all know that learning is digitized now. Digital books to be used after COVID-19 because textbooks are expensive. Last thing, universities now are going to hire instructional designers. So instructional designers are in demand in the higher education. Like at our university, we are busy trying to employ the instructional designers to design and develop interactive learning material, support material. The university has invested a lot of money for hiring the instructional designers. We all know that academics are not online experts, so they'll be working with the instructional designers. So interested staff will also be trained on how to use the what to call the instructional design program. So it means academics will be working closely with the instructional designers. Thank you very much, Prof. This was on my last point. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Mzizi. Colleagues, we are at the end of the formal presentations. I think it's now abundantly clear that even where we identified challenges, inherent or potential to those were solutions. This is what's being called the crisis of opportunity, where for the first time in history, we have been called to garner and accumulate our collective expertise and develop new ones in order to address the problems. And that's why the tone and tenor of this entire panel was so hopeful. So I now invite you to share your thoughts with us, comments, questions, critique, further contributions. You may raise your hands, you may post in the Q&A, and can I ask Shakila to assist me identify respondents if I don't see them. The floor is open, colleagues. Okay, so if we don't have any voluntary contributions, I'm going to call on you as individuals to share some thoughts with us about your experiences. Although I don't see the whole list, let me call on my good friend and host of this session, Dr. Joseph Chere. Joseph, another hopeful person, always looking for the positive in any situation. What have these 2 years been like for you?
Thank you very much, Prof. I think these 2 years have been a roller coaster ride, a mixture of emotions, you know. But as time is passing on, I think one is getting more and more comfortable in the space. One is getting more and more comfortable in the space one is finding themselves, and you realize that, you know, you're not moving in these waters alone. So this is why forums like this, I think, to me, are very, very important, because you come to realize that, you know, it's actually a community of scholars who are all actually trying to find their spaces, and you get to a point where you share best practices. I think one of the focus points is that students are very innovative. Students are moving quite fast. We are now at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, and the kind of students we're dealing with are the students who are very amenable to these times. So it actually leaves a good number of the academics on the back foot. And I think there's a lot of catching up that needs to happen. There's a lot of innovation that needs to happen. But I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there. And like I'm saying, that the creating of these spaces is actually being very helpful, creating a lot of help. As the year goes by, I think we're coming up with initiatives, and as the year's time passes, it's more about fine-tuning the technologies. There was a comment that was made, I think, by Professor Chetty, who talked about Moodle, for instance. You know, we've had Moodle for quite some time in the institution, but now as time is going by, Moodle is we're getting to use it to its maximum potential, and not just a dumping ground for material. So I think very positive outlook going forward. Academics need time, also space to rejuvenate. That's another issue to me, I think, has not been focused on, or needs more focus, is that academics also need time to be given a little bit of space. It has been a very, very high pressure time, because, you know, they're the people at the forefront of creating this knowledge. Oh, excuse me, I've just entered into load shedding. So yes, I think it has been a very interesting time.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for those words of optimism and hope. I think I missed Feruzi's hand. Shakila, please note that I can only see a limited number of participants on my screen. So if you could help me, please identify the hands when they come up. Feruzi, are you still there?
No hands are up at the moment, Ravi.
Thank you.
Prof.
Please go ahead, Zizi.
Thank you. Prof, technology has created a huge digital divide, and students from privileged backgrounds are at the advantage, and students from poor or low-income households are at a disadvantage. So now like these students from the poor or low-income households, you find that they've got old devices, and some devices perhaps are even damaged. So we are going to see now advantaged students performing better than disadvantaged students. Another thing, it's about there's pressure on academics to provide extra support, as online teaching now is 24/7. So you find that you receive emails even after hours. You have to respond to the emails. If you do not respond, a student will send 10 emails, you know what? Or if you are part of a WhatsApp group, you know what? Students will keep on requesting that you respond. So there is pressure on academics, you know what, to provide extra support. Thank you.
We have a question from, oh, he just put his hand down now. So I guess it was an error. Fikile Velakazi, you wanted to speak? I've unmuted you, please go ahead.
Fikila. After Fikila, we'll take Saloshni, followed by Joseph.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for this colloquium. It's really informative and in a number of ways healing as well. The past 2 years have been quite traumatic, I think, for many of us, not just students, but also for us as teaching workers. I think, I could share an anecdote just of the journey that I've gone through as a lecturer of political science and public policy in COVID. And these are not, some of the issues I think that Prof. Msizi speaks about, and I think some of the speakers have mentioned. When COVID hit, some of us had to go home, and the idea of home being a foreign concept, in a sense that I think the illusion of a neoliberal state, a capitalist state, sort of made us to temporarily forget about the atrocities of systems of oppression of the past that had eroded the social fabric in our society, including what we call home, including what we call families. And I think when COVID hit, it sort of reminded us of that, forcefully so and painfully so, because it was a pandemic situation. So that is for me an anecdote that I think it's important, linked to some of the issues that the Prof. Msizi is raising around the pressures then that it has placed on a teaching worker and a student and a family member and a neighbor that is now placed into a virtual community. The fact that I think one of the speakers has just spoken about the fact that we cannot avoid the fact that we live in a digital age. It's a digital era. Even students that we are teaching now are actually born into this digital era. So there is that reality. However, the social fabric of our society has not moved into what we now call the fourth industrial revolution. Other countries are already talking about the seventh industrial revolution. So there is that contestation, right? And there is that tension that exists between the fact that the reality dictates that we are virtual communities, we have become virtual beings. There's robotification of society that has happened, which has got an advantage, I think, well pointed out by some of the speakers that have spoken. But I think that the challenge that we are still remaining with is that of fixing that social fabric, and which is where most of us were thrown into. I think these are some of the things that we are dealing with, to say, if home has become a virtual space of teaching and learning, but also of working for parents, how does home look like? So if you're saying we're living in this digital era, our homes equipped enough to actually be digital species environments, to be able to then accommodate this robotification that is happening in this era, which we all can't avoid, is inevitable. It's an era that we are living in. So there is that. So the issue of privilege then comes in, versus, the fact that those of us in society who have been, on the periphery remain, remain so unchanged, but just trapped in this illusion of a neoliberal institution or a neoliberal university or a capitalist state even. So there's that a constant tension. I think the last 2 years have shown it, between digital equity and digital age, or digital teaching and learning, which is a beautiful experience. I think some of us really were saying, let us move to online learning. UKZN has been ahead of time in that sense, because we were already blending our education systems. But I think the blending was happening within a safe space that is called residencies, that is calling our office space and so on, where we needed to leave our own realities at home, but we had to now face them in 2020 and in 2021. And that reminder became glaring. So for me, that is something that I'm pointing out, to say that I think the problems and the challenges of COVID-19 are not that we are not necessarily equipped in terms of the digital era, in terms of the industrial revolution. Many of our students already knew Moodle. Many of academic teaching staff already knew how to use Moodle. So migration was very easy, was fairly smooth. Perhaps when it comes to Zoom, that is where we needed to put a lot of work, and the Google Sheets and so on, and all other platforms. But where we still need to do more work, perhaps 2021 and 2022, because this is not going to go away, is to then say, how do we integrate? How do we relocate the university into a position of being a social institution that contributes towards social cohesion, that contributes towards rebuilding this eroded fabric, particularly for humanities, I suppose for law and management sciences as well, and health sciences, and perhaps, you know, even education sciences, to say our responsibility in this fourth industrial revolution is not just to produce robots, or robot teachers or robot students, but also to contribute towards what we now call a virtual community, but a virtual community that is healed from the oppressions of the past, of apartheid and colonization, which means then that we are saying data, for example, is just like bread and butter. Data is like food. Data is like water. It has become a basic need. So we cannot then say, let us fit into this digital era without engaging the state and other actors in society to say, can we have data as a basic need? Can we have households that have got Wi-Fi that is uncapped to ensure that this issue of privilege, like you are put very well, Professor Msizi, is flattened? We make this privilege a curve flat by ensuring that that happens. What becomes the role of the university in that conversation is something that we need to perhaps imagine in the next couple of months with the Ministry of Education to say, how do we then locate the university into that role of healing, into that role of rebuilding and reconstruction of our communities and our families and our homes, so that we become fully fledged and effective digital teachers and learners. So that's my contribution, colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fikile. Thank you for those provocative thoughts and insights, which I think other members would like to take up going forward. I now invite Saloshni, followed by Joseph.
Thank you, Rabi. I was going to follow on Professor Mkhize's comment. However, I must note that Fikile so beautifully captured the opportunities provided by the pandemic and how we need to rise to the occasion to grab those and revisit and to find solutions to address, in particular, social justice and social cohesion. But just to go back to what Professor Mkhize had spoken about, the digital divide, the inequity, for me, when I look at it, the pandemic actually did not create the challenges. The pandemic was merely the disruptor that foregrounded the already existing inequities in our society. Even within our institutional system and the infrastructures, the challenges that we identified possibly existed. It was just foregrounded in this time. So we kind of were caught unawares and unprepared, and now are in a very quick solution process to identify that. But it also brings the question, and I think there's such a lovely space and discussion going on from yesterday. It brings us to this question of, due to the pandemic, much has changed. But the question is, how will the universities of the future change? What will be the design? In what format will it be offered? What curriculum will effectively skill our students for work in the time of the fourth and the fifth revolution? Industrial revolution. Because as we stand, we were catapulted by the pandemic into the fourth industrial revolution. So we knew it was coming. We were anticipating, but we kind of were forced into it. So it also requires a review of curriculum and what kind of qualifications would effectively place our graduates in the world of work to be able to deliver at that point in time. So yeah, thank you for that opportunity, Rabi.
Thank you, Salosh. Joseph, over to you. Please unmute, Joseph.
Yes, sorry. So just to add on to what Prof. Mkhize just mentioned and what Saloshni was just talking about just now, was, there has to be, it's very important to also look at it from a systems thinking perspective. And, where the whole academic process has to be revamped, and not just the idea of moving old systems onto new platforms. I think that's one of the challenges that we're currently facing now, is because you have a situation where old ways of doing things is just being put onto electronic platforms, and you're getting all of this negative feedback. So that was one comment. Then the other comment I wanted to talk about was the idea of the digital divide, which is very true. And that's why personally, as a technologist, I think it's very important to avoid the temptation of going fancy as opposed to actually something that is working. When we look at our institutions, most of them are highly, highly diverse, and it's important that we carry all our students with us. So I think technologies we need to start looking at is technologies that are right-sized rather than technologies that create this fancy outlook, but you can actually use alternatives. So I think that the nature of always trying to keep everybody and move with everybody. That was my second comment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I got very excited when you talked about the systems thinking perspective, and I was hoping you would elaborate, but that's quite okay. So we actually wrote about this, Reno Padea and myself, and we looked at the AMS program at UKZN through a systems thinking perspectives. I will ask the convener, Anna, to share the paper with this group. I now invite other comments and questions. And if we don't have any further comments or questions or contributions, I appeal. I see one hand's come up, eh?
Yeah, there's a question here. Stabiso, I'm allowing you to talk. Please unmute.
Thank you, Shakila. It's not really a question, it's just a comment or a contribution from the first year experience perspective. We have been working with our first years, and what we do is we always try to ensure that their experience from day one here with the institution is the best. So some of the issues that I think have been maybe brought by this new system of online learning, is the issues that we experienced during the time of registration. And I want to maybe reflect and maybe quote from one of the speakers where they were talking about having peer wellness mentors and peer academic mentors to become multi-skilled. And because that is exactly what we've had to experience here as the first year experience, that you find that students, because we are the first point of contact that they have during maybe orientation, and then once they are assigned a mentor, so that's the first person they will know. So you find that they come for answers for everything from the mentors. And sometimes when they want the help, they demand it probably immediately. So you find that issues that pertains to residences, where sometimes we don't have the scope, we can only just refer. You find that the student is not getting help from that side, but because they're not getting help from that side, they still want the mentor or myself to really intervene and make sure that they are assisted. And we've done that. So I think it has helped us as a program to also maybe grow and sort of maybe plant our roots within these institutions, because I think before this time of COVID and lockdown, I think we existed, but our role was not as big as it has been for the past couple of months. But going back to the issues with registration, what we found there is that with our systems that we have in place to accommodate the online registration and so on, it was easy. The UKZN staff was doing a very good job with registering students. But what some of the issues was that once the student has been registered, you find that the student maybe they used for contact details, they use the next of kin, because maybe they don't have a cell phone and so on, and they don't have their own email address. And you find that once they need to start probably attending They have no idea that they've been registered. They have no idea that they need to start attending. They need to access their UKZN email and so on. So we had to fight very, very hard to sort of reach those students. You know, we had to call the people on the system and try to maybe locate the students that were not attending, because we were identifying that when we're looking at our model and the activity reports, you find that students are not participating. They have not written any assessment. So we had to identify some of those students. And we also had students working with parents into our offices saying that, you know, the last time I got a communication from the university was when I went to pay for my registration. And that's the only time. So I haven't been attending for the past couple of months because I didn't know that, or past couple of weeks, because I didn't know that I was registered. So those are some of the things that maybe the university needs to improve on, but also it's some of the things that the first year experience have been able to address ever since it was piloted. So I think as the FYE, we just had to become the multi-skilled people overnight as well, to really assist our students and make sure that their first year experience is of better quality here at the institution. So those are just my sentiments and what I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stabiso. And thank you for highlighting through the lenses of student experiences some of the problems. Of course, you are aware that we now have a systematized, organized first year experience program, and some of the problems that you've highlighted hopefully will be ameliorated in 2022. And going forward, we're going to have a far more friendly experience for students. I want to now invite Feruzi to contribute. Please go ahead.
No, thanks, Prof. Thanks. I just wanted to make a comment on the experience based on how I've looked at the access program in the College of Humanities Pietermaritzburg campus. There are one thing that I would like us to begin to think and talk about in this conversation about the university of the future. How do we bring the voices of the student from previous disadvantaged background in that conversation? Why am I saying that? We had fear at a access program level, thinking about these students who are coming from disadvantaged background. Perhaps it is the first time for them to interact with machine or computers. How could they survive? How could they do their academic work? But at our surprise, they were able to adapt. In a very short period of time, some of them without even having the gadgets, because some of the laptops were delivered a little bit late. So in this big conversation that COVID has forced us to begin to talk about, how do we bring their voices? What is it that we can do for their voices to contribute into our teaching and learning mechanism by taking into consideration the issue of digital divide? And my second observation has been around the experience of being in a classroom. Experience of a student to look at the MTB building and feel that sense of UKZN. So some of them, they've been with us for the past 2 years, 1 year, but they've never felt that experience of student union. Buildings, because all of this, they build that identity which make up of all of us and the student themselves. And again, my last comment could be on the modules themselves. The way they were initially designed and the teaching methodologies that we are currently applying in this current conversation, is there a need for us to begin to check and see in this university of the future that we are talking about, what is it that we need to do, perhaps to the content and what we are teaching? No, thanks, Prof. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Feruzi. Colleagues, some noteworthy comments from Feruzi about the curriculum, and in particular, his suggestion about our obligation to move to new relevant pedagogies and approaches, including the need to reconsider the architecture, the physical architecture, and the impact this has on the student psyche. Shakila, do you see any hands? Any further comments?
There's no hands up at the moment. Okay, Feruzi's hand is up again. Do you want to take that?
Hi, Feruzi gets the last word. Please go ahead, Feruzi.
No, it looks like he's, that was in error.
Oh, that was an error. All right. So colleagues, in bringing the session to a close, there have been quite a number of profound observations, comments, suggestions, questions in the audience. Let us consider this the beginning of the scholarly activity. I encourage you to start writing about those problems and opportunities that you've highlighted. And I don't mean here to write in peer review publications at this stage. Just your random thoughts would be adequate, and send these to Anna or Anna's nominee. And collectively, we can accumulate those thoughts into what can potentially become a publication. Let me, on your behalf, colleagues, thank the 4 Deans of Teaching and Learning for taking us on this journey of hope into the future. They are a central cog in the UKZN machinery, keeping it going quietly behind the scenes. I also want to thank the organizers of this conference for a smart program, which brings together a multiplicity and diversity of thoughts and voices. And with that, let me say farewell. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you very much to the panelists for the enlightening discussion focusing on AMS roadmap at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Now, based on the discussion, it's clear that higher education is being disrupted by this digital revolution, and the rate of the disruption has really been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. And the result of this is that a lot of the stakeholders have now come out of their comfort zone. So these kind of discussions are actually very important. So having said that, we'd like to move on now to the next item on the program, which is the college case studies. That will be followed by a discussion, and I wish to introduce the presenters of the segment in our program. As the first presenter is Dr. Bobby Varghese, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning, College of Agriculture, Engineering and Science, Dr. Shamla Rama, the Director of Teaching and Learning in the College of Humanities, and Dr. Saloshni Pillay, who is the Manager for Student Support Services in Health Sciences. Presenters, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Jere, for this opportunity. Prof. Ravi Dhanpat, the esteemed College Deans of Teaching and Learning in UKZN, co-panelists, and all the participants of this 8th AMS Research Colloquium. A very good morning to each one of you. It is my absolute privilege to present the case study on behalf of the College of Agriculture, Engineering and Science. And for this, I thank the Colloquium Chair, Dr. Anna Bengzai, to avail me this opportunity to present the case studies from CAES. So I hope I will be able to showcase what we are doing overall in our college, but also after the overview, I have been asked to look at one of the flagship programs in our college, and that, as you may all know, over the years has been the Supplemental Instruction program. So let me share my slides with you. Thank you. Academic monitoring and support is very close to our heart, and myself, under the leadership of Professor Naveen Chetty, the College Dean of Teaching and Learning, and a very dedicated team of 6 principal and senior academic development officers, and hundreds of temporary AMS staff in the college who are appointed from time to time on short fixed-term contracts. They run the various academic support programs in our college. This includes the supplemental instruction, the writing center where students are assisted with academic writing, statistical analysis and presentation skills, hot seat tutors where students can get one-on-one assistance from the tutor regarding any content, especially in mathematics or statistics or physics. We have residence tutorials which happens late in the evenings, where students gather in the common room and learn in the presence of a senior academic mentor. We have peer mentorship programs and quite a few programs in our college. You know, we have the augmented programs in science and engineering. We have teaching and learning research going on. In School of Mathematics, we have online diagnostic testing in calculus, which is used for the first year mathematics students to gauge the skills of the students who join the first year, so that we can know where their standing is. And of course, the evaluation of the effectiveness of the AMS is what I am presenting to this forum today. During the AMS Colloquium 2018, we projected a 3-dimensional model. Manival et al. In that colloquium presented this model for evaluating the sustainability of AMS. I won't focus too much on this today, but it's a very critical slide. To be sustainable, all AMS programs need to stand the test of effectiveness. That are we achieving the academic goals of the programs that we are running? We have to see whether these have impact in terms of how many students are influenced by the AMS activity, and also the value, which is the success achieved compared to the money spent. I know people may have different opinions about this. People may even argue, but I personally also agree and believe on this fact that not all of it may make numerical sense all the time. But our return on investment is more often than not an enhanced student experience, an improved student progression and throughput. I mean, as Professor Nair said yesterday in his keynote address, that at the end of the day, all we want is our students to succeed. So in this presentation, I will focus only on the flagship program, one of our flagship programs in the College of AES, which is Supplemental Instruction. It's been running successfully in our college for more than a decade, if I'm not wrong, from 2008. SI is a very structured program which is overseen by academic development officers. It's coordinated by SI coordinators and are run by senior academically proficient students. Most of them are PhDs and into their masters or honors years. And they undergo rigorous SI training for a couple of days. They attend lectures with the students in the module each week. And to me, the involvement of the lecturer and the module coordinator of the module is also key to maintaining the quality of the program. and the principal ADOs, they do the overall supervision, they visit their SI sessions, sometimes even unannounced, to check on the quality. And what we focus mainly is that whether peer collaborative learning is happening or not. Supplemental instruction is not a remedial program for students who are struggling. It is actually catered for the whole class, and it focuses on high-risk modules, whether these modules had poor pass rates in the recent semesters, whether they are traditionally difficult modules, or modules which have high student enrollment. For example, some of our first-year classes in our college, they may have up to 1,200, or sometimes, say, for example, a Stat 130 module may even have 1,500 students. And in such cases, lecturer and student interaction is virtually impossible. And I don't blame the lecturer who don't reply to all the emails, hundreds of emails that comes to them, because that's the number of students that we are dealing with. So that is where the SI sessions really help these students, especially the first-year students, to gain a better understanding of concepts. It encourages peer collaborative learning. It encourages active learning. So what they learn in this session is what we expect they will implement in other modules where there is no SI. So technically, it should improve the whole student experience and also help them to build up a self-learning ability with their peers. I don't have to tell you this, but we know all, a majority of our students, they come from ill-prepared schools and disadvantaged backgrounds. And most of them are even scared to speak in a class setting. So these sessions help them. We tell the SI leaders to engage with them, to promote that question and answer, or deflecting of questions, or pairing of students, and various techniques we use in these sessions to help them come out of their shell, to help them not only in their academic development, but also to develop their personality. So like in any other year, this year too, we ran SI sessions for more than 150 modules in the college across the 5 schools located on 3 campuses. Most of these modules belong to, as you can see, first and second year level, and a few exit level modules, especially those which are critical to throughput, were also chosen for supplemental instruction in 2021. I'm just showing you the current data. Now, Anna asked me to talk about evaluating the impact. So when we evaluate the impact of this session on student performance, and pass rate is a key for all AMS practitioners, but we also look at the quality of the pass. You know, how is there an improvement in the marks of the students, science and engineering students in this certain modules? And for research purposes and for our personal interest, we also look at, does gender, race, and metric points influence the academic performance in SI attending students? So this slide actually shows the SI participation. It's like an overall slide. We pulled in data from various modules. And over the years, this is what we see, that around 65% of the class, they do not attend SI. Of the 30 to 35% who attend, many of them come to sessions in the week just before the assessments during the semester, or we run this few-hour catch-up sessions towards the end, just before the final exams. I'm also talking about pre-COVID times. So these sessions will be very well attended, and I would say that it does have an impact nonetheless. Then we have 10% of the students who attend the SI sessions for many weeks in the semester. So for analysis purposes, we have non-attendees who don't attend SI, not even one. And then we have attendees who are irregular. That means they may come from 1 to 3 sessions, and the regular ones who come very frequently throughout the semester. So this is all where our evaluation started in the college. In the early days, this is the kind of effectiveness graphs that were presented by the ADOs. They would divide the students roughly into attendees and non-attendees and plot their pass rates and average marks. And there was a lot of criticism. You know, I've been in exam board meetings where people have criticized those then ADOs presenting the data because they were comparing apples with pears. The number of non-attendees, as I told you, would be mostly very high than the attendees, and without any statistical proof saying that SI was having an impact, to me was inconclusive. So when I joined the college in 2016 as a principal academic development officer and started doing the SI evaluation, the emphasis was not just on churning out numbers. You know, it's just not numerical data or empirical data, but also looking at the validity and the usefulness of the data. So to start with, we started clearly showing the number of students in each category, how many do not attend, how many attend irregularly, and how many attend frequently. And this was at least the start. You know, the dean and the academic leaders, and also the academics in certain modules for which SI were run, they could see clearly that how many students they fall under each of these categories. But one thing was very sure, that the students who attended SI for longer duration, fewer and fewer of them failed. The failure rate was lower in that category. But not only that, many of them, they performed well. They fell into the 60 mark to the 100 mark category. And this data is from 2017. But again, we were looking at different numbers of students in each of this category. So I thought about it and we discussed this, and a percentage approach would have helped, but we moved further on. This is a beautiful scenario of looking at impact of SI on student performance. In 2018, my colleague, Mr. Rogeran Chibangu, he ran SI sessions for this module on PMB campus that was notorious for low pass rates. You know, in 2018, when we ran, over the past 3 years prior to that, this module had a consistently low pass rate, even sometimes as low as 35%. So as you can see from the graph, we instituted SI, and in a class of 51 students, it just happened to be a coincidence that half of the class, they did not attend any SI session for the module, and almost 50% of the class, they attended SI sessions regularly. So that was a good case study for us. The result is for everyone to see here. In the non-attending cohort, the pass rate was 38%. Whereas in the attending cohort, the pass rate was 73.3%. And this looked very promising as a phenomenal case study. And then we looked at modules across the college in various schools, and the trends, what we saw were very similar, that SI attending students performed relatively better than the non-attending ones, keeping all the other factors constant. We started to think that SI was helping some of those students to pass the module who otherwise may have failed the module. And this was definitely good in improving the pass rates. And then in 2018, again, Manival et al. Brought in new strategies, and Ashwin and myself and Dahlia and Naveen, and we all tried to incorporate that we must make our evaluations more robust. And what we brought in is strategies to also include specific weightages of number of SI sessions that a student attend, whether it is 1 or 2 or 3 or 7 weeks or 8 weeks or 13 weeks or sometimes up to 15 weeks, whatever the case may be. Each of those weightages were taken into account. Also, for having a meaningful comparison of data, we looked at equal number of students in SI attendees and non-attendees, and we employed random number selection of students to represent these categories. Another very important statistical analysis that we employed was to see if we're saying that there is a improved performance in terms of the pass rates or academic performance in terms of marks. We looked at if there is a statistical significant difference. So difference between the attendees and the non-attendees. So I employed a chi-square analysis for the pass rates, and for our average mark comparison, we employed the normal student t-test. But look at the criteria here, that the number of students that were compared between the non-attendees and the attendees, that always was the same. So this table from 2019 data shows an exam board presentation that I made to the School of Life Sciences, and there was no discrepancy. And anyone could clearly point out that even with improved performance of SI attendees, which modules had a statistically significant improvement in the performance of SI attendees compared with the non-attendees. What we further did, and this was recently published during the hard lockdown in COVID last year, is we pooled the academic performance data for thousands of students across various schools, whether they are attending SI or non-attending students. And what we found is that there was a strong positive relationship between SI attendance and overall pass rates. We saw the same SI attendance and average marks of the students attending SI, and SI attendance and individual final marks of students. This relationship was slightly weak, possibly due to the number of individual marks, thousands of marks that were plotted on the graph and the numbers that we were dealing with. So this is the impact study that I would present to this colloquium. So just to quickly conclude, regular SI attendance not only reduced student failure, but most of the students scored relatively higher marks. SI attendance showed a significant positive correlation on the pass rate and the marks of SI attendees. Apart from SI attendance, individual final marks were seen to be influenced by metric score of the students. Gender and race did not have any influence. Only 10 to 15% of the cohort attended SI sessions regularly. This varied from module to module, more than 4 weeks, of which 84% students who attended these sessions were African students. Considering the significant positive influence of SI on student performance, we can propose that interventions are necessary to increase SI attendance, very importantly for at-risk students and underperforming students. So with the advent of the 2020 academic monitoring and support policy, we envisage a way forward in this direction. Quickly, not taking much time, I just want to now point out that what we did during the COVID time last year and how we implemented SI, how we adapted to SI. So what I presented was a sequential development of impact and how we changed our evaluation from time to time and where we have reached now. But when SI was switched to online last year during the emergency remote online teaching and learning in our university, we actually adapted all SI programs very effectively, and the transition was, I should say, it was smooth. There were issues and challenges, of course, but not dwelling on that. What we did is that we created a standard operating procedure document for online SI. Our SI leaders were trained before that in Feb, but we had to retrain them and ask them to read this SOP document for online SI. The SI sessions were conducted via the dedicated Learn 21 page. Worksheets were uploaded 3 days in advance so that the students could engage. And when they came to the session, they would come with their questions. We use Moodle forum chat, voice over PowerPoints, and all this to give a feedback to the students. The MS Teams and Zoom sessions later we realized could be used when we learned about breakaway sessions to enhance discussion and peer collaborative learning. What we also tried was a novel idea that we initiated midnight sessions during hard lockdown when students were in their homes, in their own spaces. So because of the disruptions during the day, because of engagement with mainstream module and tutorials during the day, we started sessions at 12 in the night to 2 o'clock in the morning to enable them to use the free data that they had, and also use WhatsApp for not only for publicity, not only for reminding about the sessions, but the students could contact their SI leader that way. And finally, I would like to just present some of the challenges that we face in this area, and that's the massive student numbers to AMS staff ratio. At times, what happens is that certain sessions before a test or before a summative assessment, one SI leader may be catering to, say, for example, 140, 150 students, and it becomes difficult, defeats the purpose of SI. Then inconsistent attendance of students in SI sessions, that's a concern. In spite of all the motivations, students come when they wish to come. Lower uptake of SI by academically struggling students, those in the orange and the red underperforming categories. We have challenges, you know, as every one of us in teaching and learning space have challenges. But the most important of those is that we depend on UCDP for funding and running these programs, which is always a threat on these programs. So we would expect more commitment from UKZN Central and also the colleges going forward. High turnover of AMS staff, we train them. These are mostly postgraduate students, and as they graduate, they leave the university, and that needs more and more training on a year basis. We don't mind that, but we lose human resources. But yesterday, as we saw in one of the presentations, many students who are or were SI leaders, they tend to do well in academia and become good leaders in the academic space. Thank you once again to the colloquium organizers. Thank you to Chair and to all the participants who gave me a patient hearing. I hope this was beneficial, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bagasi. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Soloshni Pillay. Doc, you can take it over.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrer. I'm going to share screen. Can you see this?
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you, colleagues. Good day, colleagues, the colloquium organizers, the UTLO, and college leadership. So thank you for the opportunity to share the College of Health Sciences program. The College of Health Sciences presentation will provide a broad overview of student wellness and academic transformation, which we refer to as SWOT within our college, offered by Student Support Services in collaboration with the Office of the College Dean of Teaching and Learning. I will highlight the strategy in place, how we arrive at the strategy, its process of implementation, and its impact in enhancing student engagement for student persistence, wellness, and success. And most importantly, position the critical role of students in his or her success. Pinto in 2013 stated that student success does not happen by chance. and that improvement in student learning and success is not just the effort of an individual or a single program, but the result of an intentional, structured, coherent, collaborative, and resourced strategy and action by all involved in the student's life. This statement, together with the models of George Koo on student engagement, shaped the pillars of the current SWOT program at CHS. However, the impetus to sustain the wellness model was provided as part of the recommendations of the Africa audit into student failure at UKZN in 2005. And some background to that audit, sorry. The Africa audit identified the key factors impacting student success as non-academic factors experienced outside the lecture room. This being contextual factors, student personal factors, adjustment and integration to the university, finance and biophysical factors. The audit report recommended broad student success interventions, such as adopting a holistic approach to student success, my apologies, timeous identification of factors impacting student success, a structured retention and throughput plan, and a stronger focus on wellness promotion. The report also recommended formalized collaboration between schools, college, student support services, student structures, central services as well was key to this plan. The wellness model already in place at the College of Health Sciences was strengthened via these recommendations, as it facilitated a better understanding of whole student development. The iceberg in this slide speaks to the process of identifying the key issues impacting student wellness and success. The tip of the iceberg refers to the in the lecture room experience, the formal, the overt curriculum, the transmission of knowledge in the lecture room, with the primary focus being learning outcome, academic progress, and performance. But it actually accounts for only 20 to 25% of the student's university experience. The part that is submerged, the hidden or the covert curriculum, is the part that is not easily known or visible. This is the daily, outside the lecture room experiences, and includes the non-academic factors impacting students' performance, those very factors that Prof. Africa had documented. This submerged part accounts for 70 to 80% of his students' experience. Hence the need for a strategic, holistic, proactive, and measurable student-centered intervention. So the College of Health Sciences, over time, arrived at a model called SWOT, based on the findings of the Africa report, as well as the recommendations within documented literature. The aim of SWOT is to offer a coordinated, comprehensive undergraduate support program, where all schools within the college and wider university role players have clear responsibilities and roles and accountability. They're expected to work in an integrated manner to ensure that the equity of access translates to equity of outcomes in the minimum time. The design of SWOT is such that it compels the role player to collaborate in supporting the student to success. This collaboration, we have found over the years, allows us as student support to foster cross-functional dialogue between student support and academics. It also creates an interrelatedness between the in and the out the lecture room influence on student learning. We also found that it provided a seamless environment between the academic and the non-academic space within the college. And it created coherence in the students' learning experience. Through the services offered within student support, we were able to enhance cognitive and psychosocial development, as well as academic and social integration. So essentially, we just try to develop a strategy that would focus on the whole student. SWOT is comprehensive. It has several pillars. The pillars are actually our programs designed to enhance student engagement. The intended outcome is student engagement for student success. And the foundation we see as the Wellness and Academic Transformation Program. And these pillars include the academic orientation program from the very entry into higher education of first-year students, as well as the first-year experience, the peer wellness mentoring program, academic skills, the wellness assessment, individual counseling, and the living and learning support. Whilst academic mentoring, academic development, and teaching assistance is based at schools, these pillars collaborate with each other in supporting students to success. So the idea is to have touch points at every step of the student's academic journey. And the program allows for collaboration both within the college, as well as key central services such as disability services, the AIDS program, and the Division of Student Residence Affairs. I've highlighted here the process that is followed from entry in the very first year. It commences with the academic orientation integration program with a full support team, including student support services, peer wellness mentors, academic mentors, and ADOs. They meet the students in small groups at the extended orientation that takes place within the disciplines. This is intended to support the transition into the lecture room space. Academic support, academic skills, peer mentoring, and academic mentoring are initiated at this point and continue through the year. The wellness assessment is implemented in March, and there's a reason for the timing in March, as students by that time would have just completed their first series of tests and received their marks, and very often are shocked by the outcome. At this point, it allows for timeous identification of the factors impacting success. Students are invited for support, and services are based on the indicators in the wellness profile. The day teaching and learning support is extended to the living and learning spaces as an evening program. And tracking and monitoring takes place in collaboration with the ADOs, which allows us to identify students at risk of poor performance, as well as those that are making good progress. Students are flagged across various wellness domains, as reflected in this graph for the period 2018 to 2021. Of note is that for the period 2020 to 2021, during the lockdown, the intellectual academic domain focused on teaching and learning experience, and the physical biological domain focused on physical and mental health peaked during the pandemic. Now, this, as we know, is consistent with the increase in mental health presentations, as well as the challenges of online learning during the pandemic. For the period 2020 to 2021, 6% of the profiled students reflected a confirmed diagnosis of a mental illness, with 3% reflected for the period 2018 to 2019. 11% of the students reflected a past attempted suicide in the period 2018 to 2019, with 15% reflected for the period 2020 to 2021. So hence an increase in the attempted suicide. These profiles highlight for us the levels of vulnerability of our students. Within the academic domain, challenges with online learning and academic self-management featured prominently. 83% of our students reflected having a suitable space for online learning. However, 64% reflected digital fatigue, restlessness, eye strain, and the inability to sit through more than half an hour of an online lesson. Of interest was that 57 to 59% between the period 2020 to 2021 reflected spending more than 3 hours per day online, engaged in gaming, videos, and other non-academic apps, whilst 26% logged on to show attendance, but spent the time on social media on non-academic work. So the wellness profile applies as long as the student remains at the university, and the intervention continues from the second year onwards. The SWOT profiles are key to timeously identifying students at risk, especially the students who are not accessing support. These profiles and monitoring reports inform decisions at key structures such as CCOM and ACOM. In assessing the impact of SWOT, we track the profiles of students who end up at CCOM and at ACOM, and I'm presenting to you 9 years of stats. And we have noted for the period of 2013 to 2017, the students that finally ended up at exclusion, although small in number, were actually those that did not access the SWOT assessment, 33% of the excluded students, or accessed the assessment but did not access the intervention, 66% of those excluded students, or were identified as having a career risk on their wellness profile and did not access the career counseling, 53% of the excluded students. And of course, an interesting phenomenon was that the students excluded in the period 2013 to 2017 were from a specific discipline where the minimum entry points and the choice of matric subjects was not consistent with the demands of the curriculum. And therefore, they featured prominently in the exclusion list. So that's for the period 2013 to 2017. We move now to 2018 to 2021, more recent figures, and we found a similar trend. Students who progressed to CCOM and ACOM are those who did not complete the wellness assessment. That's 59% of the excluded students. They failed to respond to SWOT interventions, 83.8% of the excluded students. They did not complete the Aiming for Success workshop series for those with a negative term decision in the 18 months before they progressed to CCOM. And that was 55% of the excluded students. And they were also identified as having a career risk, 52% of the excluded students. We found that SWOT is effective in timelessly identifying students at risk of poor performance due to both academic and non-academic performance. And the array of services supports student engagement. However, critical to this engagement for student success is the central role that the student plays in his or her journey and the initiative that the student needs to take to access the support offered. So I've put up a very busy slide, but essentially what I'm reflecting, I've highlighted process and strategy and some of the findings of those lists of students that arrived at exclusion. But the intention behind SWOT is to enhance student engagement and look at what matters most to student success. We find that SWOT offers us the intended outcome of student engagement by allowing us to better know and understand our students and their diverse needs via the wellness assessment, understand the contextual factors, and now we add the pandemic and related issues to that, understand the institutional factors impacting student performance, and to design targeted interventions based on the student profiles, whilst at the same time expecting student-specific behaviors to enhance student success. And those student-specific behaviors would include study habits and attitudes, involvement in the support interventions, the amount of time allocated on tasks, student motivation, amongst many others. SWOT allows us to not just transition the students into university, but also transition students off campus to the world of work. So the students that enter university bring to the university their pre-tertiary experiences, the schooling experience, and much of it is historically disadvantaged students with the related experiences. And through this engagement process and the students' related behavior, the institutional programs in place, we seek to transfer the student with the appropriate attributes to the world of work. So SWOT is dynamic and reviewed as new needs emerge. So at CHS, we believe that it's actually constantly work in progress. It probably would change in the near future, especially with pandemic-related experiences. So we anticipate that blended learning will influence how SWOT is implemented going forward. Significantly, student success is an institutional imperative, as student success and throughput rates translates to institutional success. Yet we are dependent on grant funding for this critical role. So this is a thought for the future. And colleagues, in closing, I would like to also use this opportunity to acknowledge the UTLO leadership, the College Dean of Teaching and Learning, and the several layers of College AM staff. And these are the several programs and the layered support that we offered, from peer wellness mentors to academic mentors to ADOs to student support. I would like to acknowledge them for their commitment to student success. In closing, I want to take you back to Tinto's statement that I presented right up front, that student success does not happen by chance. And improvement in student learning and success is not just the effort of one individual or a student or a single program, but the result of an intentional, structured, coherent, collaborative, and resource strategy and action by all involved in students' life. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pillay, for the presentation. Our next presenter is Dr. Ashamla Rama, who is the Director for Teaching and Learning in the College of Humanities. Dr. Sharma, it's over to you. Sorry, you need to unmute your mic.
I think she might need to remove earphones as well, Dr. Joseph.
Is that fine? Hello?
You're fine, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologies for that. Thank you, Program Director. I'm going to stop my video and just share my slides and let me know if there's a problem. Thank you. Is that fine?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. So my presentation takes a slightly different angle. I want to acknowledge my colleagues in the College of Humanities and the Dean of Teaching and Learning's office. I'm actually the interim head of AMS. Our Director of Teaching and Learning is Professor Sarah Gibson, and our College Dean of Teaching you have met in panel 1 is Professor Ruth Hoskins. So I'm actually looking at the role and contribution that the AMS staff play in terms of student throughput, retention, success, or graduation. And this is for a study that we are proposing for 2022. So in terms of UKZN, we have the devolved college model. So while we have various overarching UKZN policies for teaching and learning and for academic monitoring support and for exclusion, we do contextualize some of these to reflect the different circumstances in our college. So for example, in the College of Humanities, we do have considerable successes in terms of how AMS has impacted. And there is considerable data that exists from the university's intelligence unit. And so who are the students of the College of Humanities? So 58% of our students are from quintile 1, 2, and 3. So we're already servicing students, not just in our foundation program that required this additional support and help, but more than 58%. So the College of Humanities has, for example, in 2021, we have just over 16,000 students registered as undergraduate students. And of that 16,000, we've got 9,424 who are F10s or first year students. Sorry, we've got 5,400 that are F10s. About 9,000 in total will be our students from quintile 1, 2, and 3. So the type of work that we do to upskill and enable the students and to support them is extremely important. And the data has shown that we've had successes. So I'm not presenting that particular data here, but it is a paper that, 2 papers that we are currently working on using the data sources from our university. And one looks at our foundation programs and the other at our entire undergraduate student body. So what I'm looking at in terms of what we need to think about, particularly in terms of the pandemic, is we need to focus on the staff providing support in AMS. And yes, we do focus on the students, and we have, as many of the presentations yesterday, today, and including the panel discussion before this has demonstrated, that we have a great deal of strategies, policies, and there's been innovative thinking. So COVID-19, as many of the presentations and discussions have highlighted, has been quite challenging. But at the same time, it has highlighted a great deal of level of commitment on our staff, including our AMS staff. And I'll explain why we're focusing on this particular group. High levels of dedication, high levels of compassion. And Stabiso and Firuzi talked about that in panel 1 during the discussion session. So the proposed study we want to look at is how do we enhance the skills and competencies of the AMS staff? Because they are delivering on our program outcomes in terms of our policies that we have for teaching and learning, for academic support, as well as exclusion. We are seeing fewer students being excluded. We are seeing an increase in throughput and student retention. So when we look at the AMS staff, we also need to think about who they are, and I will give a very brief profile to that. We need to think about this group in the context of youth unemployment in South Africa, and how programs like the AMS, and as my two colleagues that presented before me have indicated, most of our staff are postgraduate students working on fixed-term contracts. So how do we use this opportunity to further upskill them so that they are employable once they graduate? So this notion of to give support to those who provide support also comes from the ideas that people have talked about in terms of caring for the caregivers. When we talk about the HIV aspects, when we talk about disability, people living with chronic diseases and the kinds of support they need, we also need to take into consideration those that care. And the AMS staff can be described as caregivers of a different kind. So while their decisions to apply for the post is rooted in their socioeconomic status and concerns, and how do they pay for their student fees, how do they pay for additional living expenses, this type of opportunity is also a form of a survival strategy. And why is it important to focus on the staff? They not only drive our AMS policies and implementation, but on the ground themselves, they innovate. They are busy with problem solving. They are the first contact, particularly our F10s have, and the way in which they engage presents a specific picture of who we are as UKZN. So when we talk about the AMS staff in the College of Humanities, we are talking about close to 300 postgraduate students that work in fixed-term contracts. So this will include our ADOs who work with each school and where our schools are based on the different campuses. This will include our AMS peer and mainstream mentors, team leaders and coordinators, the writing place coordinator and tutors, and earlier it was mentioned the first year experience program that we're going to roll out next year. That will include our mentors and our coordinators, our administrative support, as well as the BSS4, which is the 4-year Bachelor of Social Science degree for students who do not meet the points to get in, but come from Quinta 1, 2, and 3 schools are given an opportunity to study. And this also includes students for the Bachelor of Music. So they may not have had formal training in terms of music, but show great potential and ability. So our AMS staff then are supported, as the two previous speakers and my colleagues have noted, by external funding. So there is a level of precarity that they find themselves in. While they may receive fee remission and some funding, funding is competitive in terms of supporting postgraduate students. But they also have other costs and expenses which they need to think about, which also plays on their minds. Many of them are parents with children that are going to school, they're heading households, they are the main breadwinners. So they are providing support to family and extended family members. So aspects of vulnerability and poverty need to be considered. Sorry. Diversity. This is a group that is considered youth because most of them are under the age of 35. They themselves come from schools that were classified as quintile 1, 2, and 3. As I said, most of them are postgraduate students, and we have a mix of local and international students, and in terms of race and gender. In terms of some of the aspects of work experience, they get the digital literacy has been touched on in yesterday's presentations and panel discussion. They also get introduction into administration, developing reports, reporting on activities, working in teams and with individuals, and leadership skills. And most of all, the problem-solving skills and the critical thinking that they can engage with. So the reason why we're going in this particular direction and looking at the AMS staffers in the face of growing instrumental and technical rationality. And when we look at the AMS policies, rules, and procedures, they are very cold-faced. You do this if you have that number of credit points. This is what happens, etc. And then you have the impact of COVID-19, which has forced the AMS staff as well as academics and other persons working at universities to rethink our interactions and the way in which we communicate and support. So while there may have been that disruption, at the end of the day, there is still that humanizing and empathetic responses and the consistency that is being provided. So in thinking through, and these are just preliminary ideas that we've been playing around with. So these are students themselves who are providing student support to other students, mentoring them in various manners, in various areas. So what were their experiences in terms of their student journey? And what support did they seek out or know about, and how valuable has that been? Which then reflects on whether the programs that we have how have they supported them in terms of their success in graduation, as well as moving on to the next degree. What motivates postgraduate students to apply for these positions? And we're not just talking about the financial aspects. What benefits do they derive from the work that they engage in? And then we need to reflect on and describe their lived experiences and realities. So on the one hand, they are, providing AMS support to the undergraduate students in the college. COVID has particularly challenged when, how, why, and what. But at the same time, and I think previous speakers in the first panel in the discussion talked about this, there has been a disruption of how do we define private from public spaces, home versus work. When you are an academic or a staff member, you have a space and place identity, and COVID has disrupted that and other aspects. And how do the AMS staff, in the midst of providing support that has been effective, how do they navigate and renegotiate the roles and identities as being students themselves, but also in their role as staff, as well as the other identities as parents, husbands and wives, breadwinners, etc. So in thinking about this, some of the theoretical and literature aspects that we can consider and that will help us in framing the study is particularly the works by Paulo Freire and Bell Hooks, looking at aspects of compassion, love, freedom, and hope. And I think what this 2 days has demonstrated that despite the challenges that we've had in the academic space, that many of us are committed to what we do. We want to help students. We want to seek out help ourselves in terms of upskilling our knowledge. The second sort of theoretical idea that we want to explore is the work by Carol Gilligan, which sometimes can be contentious in terms of how she looks at males and females in terms of the ethics of work or care ethics. What governs our morality and decision-making around types of care and who we provide that care to. And then in terms of the upskilling, looking at Amartya Sen's work on capabilities. So when we talk about the AMS staff, it's not just about what they do, but who they are. How do they create healing spaces? How do they, not just for themselves, look at the developmental and empowering and humanizing space, but also for their students? So in terms of the research design, and this is my last slide, I hope I'm not taking too much of time. We want to look at—
5 minutes remaining.
Okay, we've got their staff in all of the AMS programs and projects in the College of Humanities. But what will be different about this project is that keeping in this idea of empowerment, student voices, and the voices of the youth, is that the staff themselves, rather than being the objects that we research, we want them to become active participants in researching their lived experiences and engage. So how do we activate not just student voices, but youth voices, and think about it in the global South aspect? Much of the literature talking about students' journeys, student success, sometimes draws from assumptions based in the global North and generalization about who a student is, what a student does. That does not necessarily match to the lived realities of our students in the global South, and they use these concepts, although there is some contention. And then the idea is not just upskilling them in terms of them becoming the research object. How do they then participate and learn skills to develop publications? And as my colleague Bobby had indicated, a number of the students that receive the AMS support and those that are part of the AMS staff go on to have very productive academic careers. So thank you very much, colleagues, for listening to my presentation and the proposed project that we are thinking about in the College of Humanities. Thank you.
Have we lost Joseph?
He has load shedding, Anna.
Okay, all right. So I guess I'll go next, present this CLMS case study. My name is, okay, sorry. Need to remove the, All right, colleagues, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. So thank you, colleagues, for the wonderful presentations. Fortunately, our program chair has, I think he has load shedding. So I'm going to be presenting the case study from the College of Learning Management Studies. My name is Anna Bingisai, and I'm the head of teaching and learning. So in the College of Learning Management Studies, we have quite a number of academic support programs. Our main program are the academic development officers, who are mainly senior students, postgraduate students who provide academic advising, mainly to at-risk students, as well as students on good academic standing. They also run supplemental tutorials, as well as workshops on study skills, time management, exam preparation, and so on. We also have a first-year experience program, which has been running since 2018. And mainly with our first-year experience program, we run seminars on a weekly basis, every Wednesday on a weekly basis. Previously, before the COVID pandemic, we had seminars on a first-to-first basis, but now most of the seminars have been on, on using Zoom. We also have WhatsApp groups. Each first-year student is allocated an academic mentor. That is just when they register, they are allocated an academic mentor who they work with throughout the year. Our mentor to student ratio is 1:20. And we also have, as from the second semester of 2021, we also have peer wellness mentors who mainly focus on the wellness of students. And they also have been running quite a few workshops as well, once weekly. We also have the writing place, and we have one on Pietermaritzburg campus and Westfield campus, and on the Howard College campus, our writing place tutors are housed in the School of Law, because that is the only school or discipline that we have from our college on that particular campus. And obviously, we also have our student support services who run quite a number of interventions, such as the learning enhancement checklist, career counseling, psychological counseling, and so on. For this particular presentation, I'm going to mainly focus on, the supplemental tutorials that academic development officers offer, as well as I will provide a bit of data as well on the first-year experience and the writing place, just a little bit, because a lot of it was presented yesterday in paper presentations, and I'll also present, some statistics on the BCom Foundation. All right, so one of the questions that I've always had is, how do we know that the programs that we are offering are making a difference? Are they really working? And this question is like, each year I'm always trying to find different ways of trying to answer this question, trying to also improve myself, the staff that I work with in terms of their data analytical skills to be able to answer these kinds of questions. Because an accurate estimation of what these programs are actually doing is instrumental in evidence-based decision-making. We don't want to be offering programs that might not be making an impact at all. All right, however, this is often a challenging task. And I'm sure, once I start talking about impact, I know there are a lot of people who've got questions. In fact, one of the best ways not to be published, especially in education, is to use the word impact in your research. You're most likely going to be rejected just because of that particular word. It's actually controversial, but I would like to believe that by the end of this presentation, I might have swayed some of those people who do not believe in measuring impact into believing that it's actually possible to measure impact. Some of the reasons why it's difficult to measure impact is because of issues, the data itself that we have. There are issues of bias, and so on. In terms of AMS, most of the data that we use is actually our programs. They're observational in nature. We do not randomly assign students to interventions. We can't say you are going for SI, you are going to the writing place. We can't do that. Actually, it would be unethical. Therefore, because we do not have perfect experiments, what we just do is we observe an intervention and how it affects an outcome of interest. And that in itself presents us with a lot of problems. So, I found this diagram to be sort of like reflective of what we are trying to do. So we have an estimate that is the true difference that we want, to observe due to the exposure. For instance, students have attended SI. There is a true difference in that particular population. That is our estimate that we want to measure. However, we need to have an estimator, which are the methods that we use. And I think this is where, we end up having issues now, is the method that we're using. Is our estimator really measuring impact? And then there is the estimate itself. As you can see from the diagram, from the picture that I have here, the estimate itself is close to the estimate, but it's not the estimate, right? So I think when we are talking about impact, we need to understand that given our circumstances and the kind of data that we use, we might not be able to measure the true effect in the population. However, we can have an estimate of the true causal effect. So that is what we are measuring. So for those who might not be comfortable with the word impact, maybe we can say we are reporting an estimated total causal effect. So it's still an estimate, it's not the true effect. In order to do this, right, we need to first of all identify parameters to measure. That is the outcome that we anticipate might be influenced by the intervention. For instance, Bobby, his parameter was mainly the difference in grades. So there are different, parameters that we can use. For instance, graduation, dropout. I personally love working with graduation, dropouts, and progression rates. In order for us to measure impact, we also need a treatment and a control group, which is quite possible with our AMS data because we've got those students who attended our AMS programs and those interventions, and we have those who did not. And then the next thing is our methods. And you find that personally, when I started working in this particular field, I mainly presented my methods in terms of descriptive statistics and regression methods. But as I've developed also as an institutional researcher, there are so many other methods that I've actually come to understand, which actually have been used and are recognized as measures of impact. So these include methods such as treatment effects, propensity scoring, instrumental variable methods, differences in differences. For this particular presentation, I'm going to focus mainly on the propensity scoring methods. I'll also present some descriptive statistics as well as some regression, but my main focus is on the propensity method. I'll also present some predictive analytics using classification methods, because once it's important that we know, whether a program is making an effect, but we also want to know what are some of the factors that influence that particular effect. In terms of my main sample, for the propensity scoring method, I'm going to adopt a cohort analysis, and I'll look at students who were registered in the College of Law and Management Studies in 2014 and 2015, because my focus is on graduation. So I'm looking at 6-year graduation. So the 2015 students would have graduated, their 6-year graduation would have been in 2020, and for the 2014, it would have been 2019. So I'm looking at minimum graduation +1, as well as minimum graduation +2. And because I'm trying to measure impact, obviously, the relationship between graduation and, the exposure is not linear. There are so many other factors in between that affect that relationship. And there are quite many, but given the data that we have, I can only focus on race and gender. their admission point scores, the school quintile that they come from, their performance in the first year, and the academic support, financial aid status, as well as campus residence. And generally, in terms of AMS, this was, like I said, I'm focusing on students who have attended the supplemental tutorials. 0 here represents those who never attended any. 1, they attended at least 1 to 4 tutorials, and 2, they attended at least 5 or more supplemental instruction tutorials. So the first method that I used was to do a regression method, for minimum graduation, students who attended AMS versus those who did not attend AMS. And this graph actually just has statistics which were estimates which are statistically significant. Everything else that is on the right of my reference line, it shows a positive relationship. Anything that is on the left of my reference line shows a negative relationship. And you find that for students who attended at least 1 to 4 sessions in a particular module during that period, they were most likely to graduate, and the estimate was 1.27 odds ratios. In other words, it's 1 minus 1.27, which means they were 27% most likely to graduate relative to those who did not attend any of the supplemental instruction tutorials. For those who attended at least more than five or more sessions for each module, for any module, their estimate was 1.89, 1 minus 1.89, which means 89% more likely to graduate in minimum time than those who did not. And you find that those whose first year were at risk at the end of their first year, which means they did not attain at least 75% of their credit load, were actually less likely to graduate. That's why on this graph, the estimate is on the left side of my reference line. Now, you find that odds ratios sometimes can be a bit difficult to interpret. Therefore, I also used marginal effects. While these odds ratios are more of an analytical derivative, marginal effects are more a numerical derivative, like both they are on a probability scale 0 to 1. So you find that from this graph, students who at least attended 1 to 4 sessions based on a probability scale, which is easier to interpret, were approximately 3% more likely to graduate in minimum time, while those who attended at least 5 or more were approximately 8% more likely to graduate in minimum time. So we're looking at a 3% difference and an 8% difference. And I think one of the questions then that comes to mind is it worth it? If we are making a difference of only 8% or 3%, is it really worth investing in these programs? Now, this is for minimum +1, and it's still a similar trend where students who attended at least 1 to 4 sessions, or those who attended more than 5 sessions, were more likely to graduate than those who did not. Their estimates were approximately 43% and 48% and 53%. And again, with the marginal effects, you find that they were 8% and 9% most likely to graduate in minimum +1 relative to those who did not. So in other words, what this is showing is that attending the supplemental instruction tutorials actually has a positive effect on graduation. However, since we did not randomly assign students to the interventions, there's something we can't actually say these statistics that I've so far presented actually measure impact, because there could be issues of selection bias. Maybe there are certain students who are prone to make use of AMS interventions. So without knowing what kind of students, without controlling for selection bias, it is very difficult for us to say, really, this program has made an effect. Maybe what we could say is that, yes, we can see that there is a strong association, but we might not have measured impact. Only a carefully randomized, designed randomized experiment can efficiently estimate causal effects, because it guarantees that our study participants in the treatment groups will not differ substantially in their baseline characteristics. So the most important is that everyone that we are using in our sample, they are similar in terms of their baseline characteristics. So propensity scoring is a method which enables an observational study like what I have here to mimic a hypothetical experiment. So a propensity score is the probability of being assigned to a treatment, in this case AMS, conditional on pre-treatment characteristics. And the pre-treatment characteristics that I'm using here are those factors, like race, gender, matric points, and so on that I presented in the other slide. So there are different propensity score methods. For this analysis, I use propensity score weighting, which which creates a weighted sample in which the distribution of all the background covariates is the same between the treatment and the control group. So we want to compare apples to apples. So we want to compare students who are more or less similar in terms of their matric points, in terms of their first year academic performance, in terms of their race, their gender, all these variables. We want students who are more or less similar. So in a way, what this does is, it sort of like creates another population from our sample. Right? And this diagram that I have here presents the sample before I applied the propensity score weighting approach. You can see on the left that the sample was very different. The treatment and the control and the experimental groups were really different. But after adjusting the sample, so that I'm left with students who are more or less similar in terms of their background characteristics, I had a more balanced sample. So this is the sample then that I took now into my final analysis. And based on this particular sample that I took in my final analysis, you find that for minimum graduation, just using unadjusted regression, students who attended AMS were up to 64% more likely to graduate than those who did not. When I adjusted for the different covariates, they were 85% more likely to graduate than those who did not. However, when I adjusted for the propensity score weighting, as you can see, this is actually 0.73, which suggests that they were 27% less likely to graduate. In other words, what this is actually showing us is that there is a possibility of selection bias. It's possible that maybe most of these students who attend SI are most likely the students who need that particular service. Without SI, as you can see, once we have balanced the sample in terms of everything, they were less likely, there's an inverse relationship, they were less likely to graduate. However, when we look at minimum graduation +1, you find that, I'm not going to focus on the unadjusted and adjusted, I'm going to focus on the propensity score weighting. You find that they were 39% more likely to graduate. Comparing apples to apples, students who attend SI versus those who do not attend SI, they are 39% more likely to graduate. And all these results were statistically significant. Now, for the Beacon Foundation program, our foundation program it's a 0-year. Our students have to complete the Beacon Foundation program before they progress to mainstream. So in this particular table here, I have students who progressed into the mainstream. So we removed all those students who had been excluded in the foundation year. And then we took a sample that went into mainstream and compared them with their counterparts who were in mainstream. And if you look at these descriptive statistics, which give us an initial idea of what's actually happening here, you find that the progression rate for the foundation students from first year to second year, not from foundation to first year, from first year mainstream to second year mainstream, they actually outperform their counterparts in mainstream on all the years from 2014 to 2019. Now, using the same approach, I'm not going to go into the steps again because it's the same steps that I use for the AMS. You find that it's the same thing again when it comes to minimum plus one. After propensity score weighting, comparing apples to apples, students who make use of our foundation students were 59% more likely to graduate in minimum time versus those who versus their counterparts in the mainstream. However, minimum graduation, that's where the problem is. Because with minimum graduation, our foundation students actually are underperforming versus their counterparts in mainstream. Now, the next step in my analysis was to, sort of like understand some of the factors that influence graduation for students. And for this, I'm just going to present statistics for the foundation program only. So this is a classification tree approach. It's also called decision tree. What it simply does is it takes a sample and then it partitions it in an iterative way based on the different variables that we have. And the variables that are at the topmost are the variables that have got the most, that actually explains, or that best classify that particular group. And in this case, you find that their risk status, that is their performance in the first year, actually is the best indicator of graduation for mainstream students. So students who are on good academic standing are most likely to graduate versus those who are not on good academic standing. And then this is, for those who are on good academic standing, this is followed by their matric points. And you find that those who have higher matric points are more likely to graduate than those who do not. Out of those who actually have matric points, higher matric points, 36 and above, you find that race is also another factor that best classifies them. While it's for those who have matric points 32 to 35 and those with matric points below 31, you find that their attendance at supplemental supplemental tutorials best also classifies their or explains whether or not they are likely to graduate. For the foundation students, it's the same thing again with the performance in the first year. So performance in the first year is actually one of the main factors that explains graduation status. Also for these students, you find that whether or not they reside in university residence is also another factor which explains whether or not they are likely to graduate. Now, moving on to the writing place, I'm just going to present summary statistics because a lot of this was presented yesterday in the paper presentations. And overall, our results are showing that students who make use of our writing place are most likely to have higher marks than those who do not. As you can see in this slide, actually I disaggregated them by race, and you find that for all the races, students who made use of the writing place, their mean marks are actually higher. For Africans, you find here their mean marks are below 60, but here they're between 60 and 65. For Indian students, colored students, you find that their mean marks are between, like 60 and, sorry. Their mean marks are between 60 and 65, but now if you look here for those who make use of the writing place, they're actually between 65 and 70. In other ways, showing that attending or consulting with the writing place tutors actually makes a difference. Also, I think in the overall, when we looked at 4 modules, overall, we found that students who made use of the writing place were most likely to get 4% more than those who did not attend, who did not consult with the writing place tutors. For the foundation program as well, in terms of progression from first year to second year, we found that students who made use of the who attended the first year experience seminars, at least those who attended 1 to 4 seminars, were up to about 1% more likely to progress to mainstream than those who did not, while those who attended at least 5 seminars were almost 3% more likely to graduate, to progress to second year versus those who did not. Now, the question is, did the AMS programs make a difference? Is a 3 to 8% difference worth in the investment in AMS? I believe it is, and I think more research is actually needed to determine the actual effect, maybe say in terms of cost savings. How does a 3% difference between students who make use of AMS activities and those who do not, how does that difference translate maybe into cost savings for the university? How does it translate maybe say into into retention and so on? So there is need for more studies actually to determine, but for now, what I can say is the AMS programs that we have in the College of Law and Management Studies are making an impact, and the evidence is positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bengisai, for your presentation. I'd like to thank all the 4 presenters also who participated in this presentation session. And at this point, I'd like to open the floor to for about 2 or 3 questions or comments on the 4 presentations before we move on to our next items. Please, if we could keep our comments or questions as short as possible so that we can be able to keep to time. So the floor is open. Whoever has a question, please, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you.
We have Feruzi.
Yes.
No, thanks so very much, Chair. And thanks to all the presenters for these wonderful and very, very interesting papers. I just wanted to ask to Dr. Anne, did you guys look at some of the supporting academic support activities that happened in residencies? Because the last time we find out that in our resis, they have some of the academic program that they do, which also aim at supporting students at residential level. Thanks.
Rosie, you're muted. Could you unmute your mic?
Okay, can I respond to that, Joseph?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so because we're still trying to understand, and measure the impact of all our programs, I haven't looked at what's happening in the residences, but it's something that we probably need to look into. In fact, in my there's a paper that I'm actually working on right now, and in that paper, I'm bringing in all the interventions. So all of these interventions, I'm bringing them into the analysis to see which of these might actually, so I'm bringing in academic counseling, I'm bringing in, students who attend like seminars, like the, exam preparation and so on. So it's actually something that I need to look into. I'll try and get data from what's happening in the residences and also bring it into this analysis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Prim Naidu, I think your hand is up. You can take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I want to commend and thank all 4 of the speakers who presented on the college case studies. It just affirms the work that we are all doing at the college, whether it's staff or academics sitting in their offices or on campus, whether it's the administrators providing support, whether it's the ICS personnel, whether it's student fees, that every little bit and every stakeholder makes a difference. And I have to respond to Anna's last comment and question saying, is 3 to 8% worth it? Yes, Anna, every student matters and no student is to be left behind. So even if there was a 1% difference that we are making, it's immeasurable and invaluable to that student and that 1% of our student cohort. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments, contributions?
Professor Duma? Professor Duma?
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing me. Thank you, colleagues, for wonderful presentations. It's really interesting to know that much as we think we have differences, but we have more similarities. My question, though, is, in fact, it's not a question, it's a comment, maybe even a request to Dr. Shamla Rama. I was very much interested in the who are your AMS staff. And as part of that, I'm wondering if you would be looking at extending your research in terms of partnering with maybe the College of Health Sciences by looking at maybe comparing the kind of who they are in terms of our ADOs being fully employed with some benefits of being employed, while they still have some similarities in terms of other vulnerabilities. And also in terms of our wellness mentors who are not only just students, senior students, but also have some other vulnerabilities and clinical loads, because that's one of the things that we're experiencing, that we end up having fewer and fewer senior students wanting to come up, although they want to help, but they can't dedicate fully because of their additional clinical requirements by our professional boards. It's just a thought, and I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm just saying that while we're presenting, I was just thinking that there are so many similarities among these people, but I wonder if there is a sense of some security as in the ADOs being fully employed. And also I wonder if there's an additional vulnerability in terms of those who have additional clinical hours that they have to meet in addition to their academic program, the clinical load, and then now the mentoring that they provide. Let's think about it. You don't have to respond, but just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Duma, for, I think, wrapping it up, putting everything together very nicely. And at this point, I would like us to move on to the colloquium closure. And having said that, colleagues, participants, we have come to the end of our second day proceedings. And in doing so, I wish to call upon Professor Msizi Mkhize, who is the Dean for Teaching and Learning in the College of Law and Management Studies, to give us the closing remarks and a vote of thanks. Professor Mkhize, over to you. There's a comment from Professor Duma.
Old hand.
Okay, thank you. Professor Mkhize, over to you. Professor Mkhize, can you hear us? I think while we're waiting for Professor Mkhize to maybe get his communication together, I would like to maybe call upon Dr. Bengesai to give us her thoughts on her views on the way, the direction with regards to AMS so far. What are some of the challenging issues she has identified that students have been facing as we try to find support mechanisms for them. Dr. Bengesai.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, you put me on the spot here.
Sorry.
Okay. I think a lot of it has already been mentioned from yesterday's plenaries, paper presentations, and so on. And I think one of the main challenges that students, especially in our college, one of the main challenges that they have been raising is the fact that, there's that face-to-face interaction, especially the fact that they are failing to consult with lecturers due to the online mode. I think that is one of the challenges. But if you're talking about AMS in general, I would say, I think across the colleges, my colleagues will agree with me, in terms of our AMS programs, we sort of it's more the students who are doing well who are attending our AMS programs. Our risk students, or the ones that are on probation, are actually not making use of our AMS programs. And I think this has been a problem from when AMS started at UKZN. It has been a problem, and up to date, we haven't found a solution to that problem. So we still have the same kinds of students. We see them, in CCOM, ACOM, but they still do not attend. They only, I know in our college, they'll only be there at the beginning because it's compulsory for the registration hold to be uplifted, so they will attend. Once they get that lifted, you don't see them again. And the next time you see them again, they've moved maybe from risk 1 to risk 2, risk 2 to probation. So, and if we have the evidence that our AMS interventions are working, you can imagine how much more it will benefit those students who really need the assistance. So maybe, there's something that needs to happen in terms of the policy to ensure that the target students actually make use of the services that we offer.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Naidu, a question that I would like to pose to you as we're waiting for Prof to just come through is you have quite a vast amount of experience around engaging with students around the AMS activities and the various support programs. This has always been a challenge year and year through in of where you find good students are the ones who tend to access these services, and students who are battling tend to shy away from them. What do you think, in your experience, is the cause of this, and what would you contribute towards a way forward in order to remedy this?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Jerry. I think we need, as staff, to be aware of the student's background. Where are they coming from? We know we've highlighted quintile 1 to 3. Yes, we know that, but what are those specific challenges that students have? And I think with the first year experience mentorship program and assigning both peer academic mentors and peer wellness mentors, if we can timelessly identify those key burning concerns and needs of students and direct them timelessly to all the referral resources on campus, whether referring them to supplemental instructors, whether referring them to lecturers for further consultation or tutors, or student support services, or to the NSFAS office, if we can identify those key issues, give them a helping hand, to lead them by the hand, to say you are not alone if you are frightened or fearful of approaching a NSFAS officer located in the college. We are there to guide you along the way, whether it's online or in person, we'll enter those offices with you. So I think it's that first year experience support, intensive support, and knowing that there's somebody to guide them in that first year, and hopefully that will translate and they can carry that sort of support and inner confidence into their second year and third year. So it's really getting to know our student body and what exactly are those urgent needs. Thank you, Dr. Jerry.
Thank you very much, Ms. Naidu. I think we've got Professor Mkhize back online. So at this point, I would like to call upon Professor Mkhize to help us by giving a close of his closing remarks and a vote of thanks. Professor Mkhize, the floor is over to you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Before I do the vote of thanks, the closing remarks, Chair, allow me to talk about the multimodal learning. we talk a lot about blended learning approach. Please let us combine the blended learning approach with the multimodal learning, where we cater for all types of learners. We have to cater for visual learners, auditory learners, reading and writing learners, and kinesthetic learners. So please, multimodal learning is important. Let us combine it with blended learning approach. Program Director, now coming to the closing remarks and the colleagues, I feel honored to get this opportunity to conclude the 2021 UKZN 8th Academic Monitoring Support Research Colloquium. Certainly, these 2 days were useful. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who attended and who made this colloquium a success. I would like to start with a keynote speakers, the great scholars, the distinguished speakers, Professor Sidney and Dr. Upasana Singh, Ishara Maharaj, and Zama Kanile. Thank you for gracing our function. Thank you for sharing with us your valuable thoughts on assisting students thrive during online learning. To the DVC Teaching and Learning, Professor Songa, to the college DVC, Professor Makata, to UTLO Director, Professor Danpat, to the college Deans of Teaching and Learning, Ruth Sine, Naven. Thank you for availing yourselves. Thank you for taking time off your busy schedules to show support in the College of Law and Management Teaching and Learning Unit. A special thank you to our Colloquium Steering Committee, Logistics Committee, and Abstract Review Committee, and Corporate Relations Department. I know organizing Colloquium is a challenging task. This event was not possible without great preparation and wise working hands and support from every corner of UKZN. Siyabonga. To the Department of Higher Education, Science and Technology, thank you for injecting the primary resources, the UCDP development grant towards our colloquium. We hope to continue receiving your excellent support. To those academics who have done presentations, thank you for your valuable input. The information you have shared with us is much appreciated. To the eyes, ears, and voice of our university, the Corporate Relations Department, thank you for spreading the message to every corner. Your role is crucial to us. To the program directors, and session chairs, thank you for your services. To the deans of teaching and learning and the heads of teaching and learning units, thank you immensely. It was an enlightening, informative, and inspiring panel discussions. Finally, thank you to all of you for productive discussions. Thank you for joining us at UKZN. Hambani kahle tsamaya sinhle, go well. Tot since. Thank you. Bye-bye.